Right, let's go through a few common problems I find when I'm reviewing project charters. And for everyone's sake, I'm going to be using the term project charter, but this will apply to most project initiation documents. You know, statement of works, project investment proposals, development proposals, business cases, so on, so on, so on, so on. Let's start with the big one, understanding. Many projects fail right from the start as the project manager and the client are not on the same page. In many cases, this isn't an issue of technical complexity. Even on simple projects, the client and the project manager fail to connect. There are many reasons for this, but the central issue generally is communication. The project charter is designed to create one source of truth. However, when it's developed without consultation and understanding, it almost certainly fails to meet that essential requirement. Whilst misunderstandings can generally be captured by the client when they're reviewing it, sometimes if the project charter is too vague, the client frames what's intended there with their own version. Parties believe they're on the same page. The reality is they are poles apart. Good tip here, work with your stakeholders, develop your charter in collaboration, try and understand their needs, their expectations, and I guess be as objective and specific as possible. And when you're making assumptions, make sure they are clearly communicated. Those who create documents in isolation will generally struggle to deliver a good charter. So, request clarity, pick up the phone, email, set up a meeting. As a project manager, this is on you.
You are the chosen one!
The next issue is a lack of a nexus between the project's outcomes and what the organisation's trying to achieve. Your project is designed to add value to the organisation, so make sure that it fits with the organisation's trying to do. How organisations develop these outcomes, and normally strategic outcomes, is they first identify their organisational capacity. I generally call this stuff. But they say, look, given all the stuff we have at our disposal, how can we best use this to position ourselves where we want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 minutes, whatever their plan is? When a project borrows some of this stuff and runs away from what the organisation's trying to achieve, they're thereby diminishing the organisation's ability to reach their strategic goals. So it makes sense. It's rational that your project should point in the direction to which the organisation is heading. I find this a big issue on project charters and business cases. To make it obvious, state how your charter or how your project is actually assisting the organisation to meet its strategic goals. If you are going the other way and borrowing some of its stuff, make sure you can demonstrate a return on investment. So look, I'll borrow some of your stuff and in 3 months we'll return more stuff than I borrowed. That makes sense. This makes sense. I don't really find any other version makes sense.
That doesn't make sense.
With that, make sure your goals and objectives are developed in accordance with the SMART acronym. It's so simple and people fail to use this all the time. For specific, consider not just this big area of we could do this, this or this. Consider it as a set of concentric circles. And your job is to stop the stakeholders being scattered like this. Bring them together by adding information, detail, or through exclusions. The more specific you can make a project, the better chance you have of your stakeholders being closer together in understanding. This level is bad because this stakeholder is thinking a totally different version to this one. Making it specific, adding those boundaries, helps substantially. It's actually quite fun.
I've seen this trick.
Also, be objective for any deliverables. Don't use words like big or improve. Quantify it. State the size, capacity, or by which factor you're sitting to improve something by. Remember, these are goals and objectives, so aim to achieve something of value, not just the minimum standard. Your critical success factors are kind of your minimum standards. Your goals and objectives should be higher than that. Quick example. Let's say you were trying to raise some money for a charity and you're running an event. The cost of the event was $1,000. All right, so critical success factor, you would have to at least make $1,001 to make sense. However, you might have a goal of $10,000. let's say you raised $8,000. Well, you haven't quite met your goal, but is the project a success or a failure? Well, effectively, it is a success because you've met your critical success factors. So from a purely financial point of view, you've actually achieved your project's, I'm not going to say outcomes or goals, but you've achieved success, a degree of success in your project. If you'd raised $900, arguably the project would be a colossal failure because your intention to raise money, you're actually going backwards.
The car wash actually cost us money.
I also tend to find people don't communicate benefits enough at the early stage of the project. And for this, consider not only the direct benefits, but also the flow-on effects. On that note, make sure they are correlated. For example, we might have a project to reduce workplace injuries. And in this case, we could actually say that one of the benefits would be increased productivity. I mean, it's rational, right? As less people will be away from injuries, you can see that that would be a flow-on and correlated effect. So consider those kind of benefits when you're expressing your project's benefits. When you're looking at scope, make sure the specifications are specific, as this will enable you to discharge your contractual obligations. A specific project charter or scope contained within allows you at the end of the project to say, yes, everything has been met. A very vague scope makes it so painful and so difficult for the client to accept, and it makes it very hard for you to say, I've completed, I want to move on with my life. On that note, make sure within the scope of works that you've covered all the activities required to produce the deliverable. Often things are omitted at the start, and trust me, you've omitted things. You've omitted communications, meetings, you've omitted approvals. All of this takes time. And from my experience, many projects, they don't go over budget from poor management. They go over budget and over schedule from poor scope definition because we failed to identify these things that are going to be required within our projects. Have a look at your schedule. Do you have communications in there? Now, on the note of estimations, your estimations at this stage are probably a rough guess. If you've done the project heaps of times, you've probably got some strength in your estimates, communicate that. If not, provide a range. Look, this project is expected to cost between X and Y. On that note, if you are given a budget of, let's say, $10,000, you don't have to make all the activities magic up and the cost to be $10,000. Start with your scope. Start with what you're trying to actually produce, your product scope, and then work backwards and say, okay, well, to achieve this, I need to do this much work, and the costs are going to be this. Then look at your budget and say, is that sufficient? Do I need more money? Do I have a whole heap left over? If so, can I add value by spending that money? If you can't add value by spending that money, hey, maybe don't spend it. I do get there are circumstances where if you don't spend it, you lose it. I disagree with that model, but that's the world you live in. Got it. Also, I guess if you have a high discrepancy between the budget and kind of what you've planned, go back to the client and say, look, I've costed this at $3,000. Have I missed something? Risks, I actually tend to find they're done pretty well, but don't discount the risk of not going ahead with the project. Or also flip it around and think of risks from an opportunity perspective. Your charter is a way to communicate the project to the organisation for approval, so make it sell itself. Look, that's a quick summary. I really hope this helps in you continually improving your project charters. Take care, do well, I'm out.